Alright, next test is looking good. So we have the right hand switch installed now and some temporary connections to make sure everything's working okay. So you can see around here, those two brown wires tie the start switch in on the right to the clutch switch on the left, and the green is just a temporary ground. I need to figure out how I'm going to wire that. I've got all my grounds tied together from both the left and right side switches, and that's going around to the battery. I've got the battery temporarily connected, and this is my ignition switch. So, nope, this is my ignition switch. So if we turn it off, the lights go off. Turn the ignition switch on, we initialize, and we have our initial outputs. When we honk the horn input and output light comes on. High beam, low beam, turn left, turn right. The start button is not coming on because it's tied into the clutch. So when we activate the clutch, now the start input works. If the clutch is released, the start button doesn't work. So that's exactly what we want. There, set the clutch on again. And then the kill switch. Kill, run, kill, run. So far so good. Now that we have the right and left grips working, my next step is to check out the ignition switch. So one lead will come from a 40 amp fuse, which is directly to the battery, to the ignition switch. The other will go back to the MotoGadget unit to let the system know that it's turned on. There is another output here that we're going to use for the parking light. And then one of them we're not going to use at all. Well, maybe two of them we're not going to use. Well, two are set on 30. So the numbers that are embossed in the bottom here are 56, 15, 58, and 30. So the two in the center are 30, that's 58, that's 15, and that is 56. So with the switch off, and there's some very faded marks on here saying that that direction is off, the hot would be powered into 30. Should be right there. Then let's say to the ignition would be 56, which should be right here. Alright, so just check for continuity right now. We've got nothing. That's the parking position. There's one click and then on. So that's correct. And then we turn it back off. Now for the parking, that should go to 58, which is right here. That's right, and it should turn off when you go to on. Alright, so those are the connections we want to use. So what I'm going to do is make up some spade connectors. I'm going to run the 30 from here to the fuse holder, one direct line. So I think I'll solder it to the fuse connector and then all the way up to here, and just use a spade connector because that's what this accepts. This will go to the MotoGadget unit, so I'll do the same. I'll go one continuous piece. This I'll use red since it's hot from the battery. This I'll use black. Maybe I'll use blue because that's an input to the MotoGadget, and we've been using blue for that. And then I'll use black for the parking light, which will get grounded on a common bus up with the rest of the lights. So that's my next step. Okay, so here's what I've done. I've gone ahead and made up a cord, a wire for the ignition switch, and also while I was at it I realized I needed to power the clock off of the same connection. So I soldered a connection here and covered it with some heat shrink. So this connection will go to the ignition switch. This one I've left a little longer. It's going to go to the clock, and then voltmeter will actually piggyback off of the clock. So this goes to 30, which is this one on the center. A snug fit. And then the blue is the input that's going to the MotoGadget, which is when the ignition switch is on. So this is 56, which is the one up here that we tested on the top. All right, good. Another nice fit. Now, we talked about before the line that's going to the park switch, which is coming off of 58 right here. However, I haven't wired that yet because I think I may be able to modify the wiring harness directly and bring the wiring harness directly into that and avoid a couple connections. So I'm going to hold off on that till I get to starting to wire some of the outputs. Meanwhile, I can run this along the spine of the bike, leave this loose, and should be able to test it using the actual ignition switch. So solving a few little problems along the way, maybe problems the wrong word, challenges. This is the line from the rear brake light, and it needs to tie into the same input as the front brake light because they get loaded in parallel. I'm bringing these inputs in from the front through the storage box and then the brake light from the rear. So I don't want to solder everything together because I want to be able to get the box out so I can change the battery if I need to. So I'm going to use a butt connector in here, which I'm going to use sparingly, but it's inside the box. It'll be protected from the weather. I think it'll be fine. What I'll do is I'll solder another lead onto this number 7 here, which is the brakes light. I'll bring that lead out to a butt connector, plug it into here. That way when I need to separate it, I can unplug that butt connector and I can get the box out. The other thing I'm working through now is I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to route all the wires. I'm working on some frame routing options here, and I've got a couple holes drilled in the box. These edges are rough, so I'm going to have to find some grommets or follow these down or something to smooth those out and make sure I don't damage any wires. I'm also looking at a path for the rear brake lights, which run along this level here and probably into the back of the box, but I won't know quite what I'm going to do yet on that, so I'll follow up. Alright, a little more planning going on here. I'm starting to route the outputs, and I'm started with the rear taillights. So what I've done is I've rewired the rear taillights just with a new wiring harness, just to be fresh. Now there's actually a lot of loads that come off of the light circuit, so I marked those on my wiring diagram with triangles. I have the headlight low beam, the clock and voltmeter lights. Those are branched off each other. The speedo light and the tachometer light, those are also branched off each other. The rear running light, the sidecar running light, and the sidecar rear running light. So the sidecar won't be hooked up right away. So definitely going to put a plug in to run the sidecar outputs. I'm going to mount that just to the side of the bike with a short pigtail so that I can plug it up whenever I want, and if I don't want it plugged in, it'll stay out of the way. So I simplified this a little bit down here. What I've got is, this is the MotoGadget unit, and it really only has to go 2 places. So to the rear, it's going to the running light, and then I'll branch off, and through the plug, I only have to put the one running light circuit, and then on the opposite side of the plug I can branch out to the sidecar front running and rear running light. Then in the front I can just run one wire to the front of the bike. That'll power the low beam, and off that I will branch out the speedo and tach branch and the clock branch. So it looked pretty complex on paper, but I think I've got a decent plan. My next step is I'll start by putting the sidecar plug together, splice it into the rear running harness, then I'll put another soldered splice in to go to the front of the bike in the MotoGadget unit, and I should be in pretty good shape. Since these are all outputs, I will use black wire for those. Alright, this is going to be a 5 connector plug that's going to allow me to disconnect the rear portion of the bike It's also what I'm going to use to tie into the rear wiring harness in the MotoGadget unit, and then I'll use the same area to splice in to the sidecar harness. Decided to kind of batch this a little bit in violation of lean flow rules. If you're a lean guru, then you're not going to be happy with this, because really we should be doing single piece flow, complete one at a time. But that's not what I'm doing today. We'll try it out. The biggest problem with this is that if I make an error, I've probably made an error to 5 times rather than an error 1 time that I can fix. The upside is maybe I won't forget to put these grommets on. Oh, it hurt. These wires are sharp. I have a feeling I'll be experiencing this job for several days in the forms of worn out fingertips. I did discover in the last go round that it does make some sense to trim the tabs on the portion of the connector that interfaces with the insulated part of the wire. What am I missing? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tried to get away from me. So we'll do that real quick. So I've got these on. My soldering iron is warm. Bought myself a couple new clippers. 1, 2, 3, 'Too much. 4 and 5. Okay. So that's that. Grommets on, wires stripped, pieces clipped. When you do that, what I found was if you position this pretty well, I was able to do both crimps at once. Get them started, make sure it looks good. That did not work well. It did last time, I swear. Let's try it again. Probably will cut that off and do that again. There we go. That looks good. I think the initial positioning of the wire is pretty critical. Okay. Wrong end. There we go. Maybe if I start these, let's try this. Start them in real quick. At least then they're encouraged to go the right direction. See how that does. Of course, if I had the right tool, I'm sure it would be a heck of a lot better. That was great. One, two, three. Ground. Try this again, because I like that. Stick it up in our tool right there. Oh, wait. That's interesting. Didn't get the front. Just did the back half of it. There we go. Alright, let's cut this crappy one off. I don't like that at all. I cut my wires a little bit long, so it's not going to hurt anything to redo it. Got there. Got some extra connectors. Get them encouraged in the right direction. And a crimp. Well, a little better maybe. Alright, let's do some soldering of these. It's my handy dandy hold down wrench. Alright, let that work in nicely. Get it out of our way. I think I see a cordless soldering iron in my feature. Oops. Never ever sit exactly like I want them to. Maybe I should reverse hands here. We'll go all out lefty. Number 5 here. Soaked in nicely. Alright, so let's get them in our plug. Right now, it does not matter what order they go in the plug because I haven't done anything to the opposite side. Let's move these grommets up. I think I found on these, if you put them right about there, it seems to work pretty well. That one's a little dealy whopper, didn't it? That one too. Great advertisement for having the right tools for a job. But I think it's still going to work. I guess if not, look forward to doing a bunch of connectors again. Alright, so we got your plug. Let's see, the little locking tab is on the upper side, oriented like this. So I'll put the tab there that locks in place, and I'm just gonna, whoops, and I'm gonna start over here. Click, click. Usually do the ground last. Oh, no click. Had that problem before, haven't we? Let's try it in a different location. Click. Click. And what do you think? One more? Click. All right. That one grommet's probably not seated quite as far as I'd like, but other than that, it looks pretty good. So I'll number these. Haven't decided how yet. But I'm going to put some wire numbers on these. I guess it doesn't much matter, although it'd be kind of nice if the pinout matched the other one I just did. So I started with 13, 14, 15. Across, let's see. Starting away from me, 13, 14, 15 was the ground, so maybe I'll go ahead and keep the ground numbered 15. That kind of makes sense. So this is 13. This would be our running light circuit. 14 would be the next one. And that would be our brake light circuit. Like I mentioned, I'll call 15 our ground, since it's the ground on the other side. Seems like, on the sidecar side that is, seems like it would make sense to keep that a little bit consistent. And then I'll just number from there. So 16 up here on the top. And I reckon I need a 17. Which would be this one. Now, I've made this mistake before. Got to go ahead and number the other ends. Otherwise, you end up having to bring them out, figure out what belongs to what. So let's see. On this page, I've got a 16 right here. So that was my 16. And I'll give myself some room to work here at the end. So that's 16. Got a 17. That was my 17 right here. Again, a little room to work. And I'm going to have to find a new page here. Wire numbers are cheap. Oh, 13, 14, 15. 13, this fella here. Try to get these about the same distance from the end just for symmetry. It's 13. And 14. And we'll need 15, I think, for the ground. Yeah. Alright, so now what I have to do, get a couple pieces of tape and just gather those up to make it look a little cleaner while I'm working. All the wires going every different direction can be intimidating, without a doubt. So the next thing I have to do is, I've already cut the new rear wiring harness and I've wired that into the tail lamps. That wasn't very smart because what I should have done is soldered it first, or plugged it up first, but I wasn't that clever. So I'm going to have to do that on the bike, I guess. Luckily I've got a pretty long lead, so it's not like I'm working in a terribly awkward spot. Alright, let's see what that looks like. So, this is the OEM tail lead. I'm going to cut that. It's going back to the rear of the bike. Then I'm going to put this in through the box right here. I'm going to do the same thing for the sidecar lead. So some of these wires have to get tied together. That way, if I have to take the box out, I can just unplug a plug on either side and access the box, which we need to be able to do because the battery is under there. Now eventually I'll probably move the battery to the sidecar, but for now I want to get this bike all sorted out just as a two-wheeler, and then I'll enhance. Here's a quick test of the electrical system. I've just gotten the rear lights wired in and we can see their function. Ignition on. The unit's initializing. Should be no lights on at first, and there's not. When I flip from high beam to low, the running light comes on. Brake light. Rear brake light.